Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Hello, mate.
G'day, mate. How are you?
Very good. I know where you're going to go, but I don't want to go there.
Well, I don't think both of us want to go there, do we?
Yours is...
I mean, other than the Richmond supporters...
Are you sure you don't want to go there as badly
as I... The Richmond supporters were definitely happy to go there. I went to the game.
With Dean?
With Dean, one of our mortgage brokers.
Mortgage broker.
Mortgage brokers. And, let's just say he was up and about, and I was sitting there shaking my head. At half-time, the game was so poor. Seriously, and I heard Trent Cotchin on SEN basically say, geez, I came off midway through the second quarter there, and he goes, if I was a supporter, I'd be bored. I'd be hating this game. I was like, I agree. I mean, I actually said, it was Thursday night, so I said, must be something else on TV. I was ready to switch over to get onto my phone and watch something interesting.
That's telling if you're switching over.
It opened up in the second half, and we didn't play well. We didn't play well. So
I'll tell you how it went in my house. Andrea goes, aren't the Dockers on today? Because we were doing something on Sunday afternoon. I went, oh, that's right. And she goes, do you want to watch it? And I went, let me check. No, they were getting flogged. So
anyway.
All right, we've got a very special day today. We reserve an extra spot on the couch for a reason, Ben.
We do.
That's to bring in some of the greatest minds in Australia when it comes to property. So we've got a special guest today. But before we get there,
yes,
we're going to do the Mindset Minute.
Okay, what have we got this week, mate?
Abraham Lincoln.
I really liked last week's one, though.
Did you? What was it?
I can't remember.
That's still really. What was the week before?
Oh yeah.
And
how did the push-ups go?
Great. I knew you were going to ask that.
How about the guitar?
The guitar, I'm actually going. I'm probably doing 3 out of 7.
All right.
But how are you going with your saxophone or whatever it is?
Oh no, I didn't commit.
Okay. Push-ups every day. I've had a head cold for the last 4 days, so I just go and do the girls' push-ups just to make sure I still get the habit.
Right, yeah, good work.
Rather than
I like it.
But I've been up to 20. Don't worry about that. So I haven't missed a day. What's the date, Ivers? 4th of April. So what's that? Getting close to 100 days.
Yep.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it, mate. All right, Mindset Minute. Abraham Lincoln, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe.
Makes sense.
So yesterday I spoke to a client.
Yep.
And she's a listener.
Yes.
Actually, I'll rephrase it. She's a listener of the podcast.
Yes. Not
a client.
Yep.
And she gives me a call. She said, I think I might have made a mistake. I've bought an off-the-plan property. So I called her and we had a bit of a chat. And the interesting thing was there was never any negativity towards the person who put them into that situation. She said, oh, look, if I've got the wrong one, I'll just write it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's a common thing that you hear from people. They just say, well, I've made a mistake. I'm a bit embarrassed about the mistake. Instead of sort of, putting the blowtorch on the person who put me in it, I'll just put the blowtorch on myself and I'll write it out. So my advice to the people who are thinking about investing in property is if you're given 6 hours to chop down a tree, spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. So all of our listeners are doing that, Ben. They are spending the first 4 hours sharpening their axe because they are listening.
Correct.
To the principles that
Learning,
they can apply.
Educating themselves.
So that they can make sure they don't make those mistakes. But it's very simple. Don't whack your trees with a blunt axe, Ben. So
True. And just also on that point, the psychology of investment is quite interesting around people who hang in there, whether it be the share, they buy a company or they buy a share, really, they make the wrong call and they just think, oh, it'll come good, and they potentially put bad money and keep chasing their losses or whatever it might be. It's funny, isn't it? Whereas the opportunity cost for her could be, look, I need to take the hit, get out of it and basically reset myself up in terms of what I look at. And I mean, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with one of our members of Parliament, John Alexander, in Sydney. So I was up in Sydney this week and we were talking about obviously housing affordability and talking about negative gearing and so forth. And he was anticipating that everyone would just get out of these properties if they all went bad, and that could, see a huge correction in the market. The reality is they don't.
They won't.
They don't. They
No.
just don't, because they sit there and go, oh, it's going to come good. I don't mind if I've got a little bit of red ink on. That's how it goes. So, there was a lot of discussion around some ideas about how we provide more supply and how we look at housing affordability. But I'll talk to you more about those, because I've got another. Hopefully tomorrow I'll be talking to one of the advisors for the Treasurer's department, so that'll also be quite interesting.
Still all right hanging out with me these days?
Very happy to, mate.
Low levels.
Very, very happy.
Maybe
No level. Just trying to advocate for property investors. We're getting beaten up at the moment, and on all fronts. We're being blamed for everything at the moment, and I think 2 million property investors out there. They need a voice. So there's more to be said about that coming up.
There you go, Nathan Buckley. There's your excuse. It's the property investor's fault that you're not winning any matches.
Hey, mate, what about your bloke? He's got a 5-year contract and looks like he can't teach.
We are interviewing a household name, Ben.
Yes.
Frank from the block.
Yes.
Frank Valentic from the block. Welcome to the couch.
Thank you, guys. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Hey, mate, for those block listeners of our podcast, they would be very familiar with you, but can you give them a bit of an insight as to what it's like to have the two massive exposures of making television and being at an auction? What's that like to be in the thick of it?
Pretty scary, pretty nerve-wracking. So, we've been on 8 series now, 29 of the 35 block apartments, and you still get nervous in front of the cameras. You still get nervous in front of knowing that it's on a worldwide audience on TV, but it's good fun as well. We're engaged to bid for our clients because they don't want to be on TV, so I get my ugly blockhead on TV every year.
Mate, you've got a face for television.
Not really.
Dressed all the time.
Not really. My mate says I should be on radio because this head's no good for TV. So, but no, it's been an interesting journey. It started, as I said, in 2013 when we were on the Cameron Street Richmond series, and literally I asked a few of the agents if they had people who were had bidders who didn't want to be on TV, and put my name forward then, and it just went from there, I suppose.
So is that typical for you? You don't not necessarily always got the client yourself. It's you say, well, if someone else doesn't want to be on there, is that more than likely, or are they a lot more of them your client?
Yeah, well, at the start it was some of the agents had buyers there that were not wanting to be on TV, but now we've got quite a few of the clients approaching us direct. They have got some fantastic depreciation benefits. Block properties. Last series, they were about $90,000 a year, which is massive. And most of our clients have been investors that have been attracted by the good depreciation, the good rental returns. This series, they're looking to lease them out for $2,500 a week, fully furnished. So it's quite a good return. And it's been an interesting journey. So we've already announced series sort of 9 and 10. Staying in Melbourne, and one of them has been confirmed as the Gatwick Hotel in St Kilda, which should have some very interesting stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other one is rumoured to be one in Elstonwick, which I can't confirm, but there are some good reports that there'll be some family homes in Regent Street, Elstonwick. So it'll be really interesting, and looking forward to again being involved.
Very good. So you've got a background as a semi-professional soccer player. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, I used to be able to kick a ball around okay. Was never the best player in the world, but worked hard at my game and played 20 years of semi-professional soccer. I played for Australia at youth level, played for Victoria at senior level, played over 400 odd games. So I'm very competitive, and I love and have a passion for sports. So I ended up being a P.E teacher, studying to be a qualified P.E teacher, and getting in the sports fitness industry for about 12 years. So that's what I did prior to being a buyer's agent. When I started 17 years ago, that was what I was doing. And it was born from my passion for sport and passion for playing soccer, and I headed down that path.
So how did you then connect into real estate? What was the pathway into real estate for you?
Well, it was buying my own properties, Ben. So I started investing in property when I was 25. My mum wanted to get me out of the house. So she said, you need to buy your own first house. So that's what I did. So I bought a double-fronted Edwardian in Hickford Street, Brunswick East in 1995 for a whopping $168,000 back then.
Big bucks. That
Big
sent
bucks.
you back.
But Mum was saying, you're 25, you need to get out of the house. So I was engaged, and she's saying, it's not good you and your girlfriend living here, and you need to have your own place. So she gave me that first push into property, and bought my first property. And then a couple of years later, she actually gave us a push to buy investment properties as well, and said, you guys are all educated, you need to start start to investing in your future. So I bought a little 2-bedroom apartment in Byron Street, Elwood, for $122,000. Then bought one the next year for $125,000, and then really was bitten by the property bug.
Now, were your parents investing as well? Did they have a
No.
portfolio? So
No,
they were
they
pushing
didn't.
you into that, but had they realised that they needed a little bit more and their time was up, or what was the...
Mum was, I think, ahead of her time. She worked at the St Vincent's Private Hospital as a kitchen hand. My
Yep.
parents came from a refugee background from Croatia. They came here in
Fantastic.
1969.
Yep.
Dad was a cleaner. And my mum used to talk about this lady Despina, and I met her in the kitchen. She had 10 properties, and
Yep.
Was earning probably $16,000 a year. And she just kept saying, if Despina can buy property, then you guys have got uni degrees. You should be able to build a future. And that was how it all started, really. And then by the age of 30, I had 6 properties. And I was starting to do it for family and friends,
Yep.
and not getting paid for it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, my mum passed at the age of 48 with cancer, and that was a light bulb moment for me. And I always told her I'd have a successful business.
Yep.
So I was tossing up, what would I do? Do I get into fitness, which I knew everything about, or do I get into property, which I had 6 properties, but I really didn't know anything about real estate?
Yep.
So I changed the ladder, and that's really how I started my
So
career.
did you do selling before?
No,
You went
no.
straight into,
So-
so similar to Bryce and myself, never
Yep.
been a selling agent, always been on the buyer side.
No, always
Yep.
been a buyer's advocate. It was something that there were a couple of buyer's advocates at the time in 2000, and I thought, that's really what I want to do. I never actually aspired to be a real estate agent or a buyer's agent when I was growing up. I always wanted to be a PE teacher. I always aspired to be that fit PE teacher, a semi-professional soccer player, and then I suppose I fell into property. I really, didn't even think about it too much in the end.
Now, Bryce, I don't know whether you know this story, but when I started the Mortgage Choice franchise very early on, so I started that in late 2004, still educating myself, still looking at, I'd go along to all of the seminars, all the workshops and so forth. And I found myself one night in St Kilda Town Hall
I know who the speaker
with
was.
Frank Valentic, and he was doing these great little presentations, and I've been to all of them, the Spruikers, the Henry Kay, the Peter Spans, all those types of people out in the world, the Dimter Boholts, those types of things. And effectively, Frank was speaking my lingo. So there was a lot of sensible process. You grew up in northern suburbs.
Yeah, I did.
So Reservoir or that area through there.
Preston. Yeah,
Preston Reservoir through there. So you knew that pocket really well, but you also knew the rich pocket of the inner eastern area. So it was really good. I mean, and I thought to myself, he's one to watch. And now he's got this fantastic business. He's obviously a great name in the industry in terms of how he's been helping his clients get their ultimate goal. So
yeah, true. I've known Frank for 10 years. He's been consistent in his message in that time, and it's about buying good quality assets, holding them for the long term. So we've always admired that about you, Frank.
Thanks, guys.
The why. Your mum pushed you out at 25, said buy the first property, but have you refined your why now? Why? Because buying investment properties comes with a few hassles. When I got a call from my property manager last week that the tenant was home on a Saturday night and flooded the joint.
Great. You love those calls, don't you, when you're out having dinner?
Just left the bath
with
on?
Left the bath on,
Yeah.
and she was still at home. I'm thinking,
Yeah.
but obviously I've got a bigger why and a bigger picture, but that stuff happens. So you've got multiple properties.
Yeah.
Have you refined the why? What's the bigger picture for you here?
Well, the bigger picture is really to provide a better future for my family. I've got 2 young kids. Jackson's 10, Madison's 8. I've got a lovely wife, Michelle. And as my parents did, they try to give us the best future. And really that's what we're doing it for. And, to have nice holidays, to have the nice things in life. Bryce and Ben, I'm sure we all agree it's always good. We try and get away and go overseas every year. And we like to live a nice lifestyle. So, that's what it's all about. It's about enjoying the journey and really capitalising on the opportunity our parents gave me. My parents came here as refugees. My dad almost turned back once because it all got too hard to get away, and my mum pushed him. And if they didn't come here, I would have had a very, very different lifestyle. So I'm very appreciative of that opportunity. And so I just enjoy the opportunity to, create a better life for ourselves and our family. And that's why I do it. It's great to have money, but it's also, to enjoy the moments, because it doesn't matter how much money you've got when they're knocking in those nails into your coffin. It's about life's moments.
no good being the richest person in the graveyard, is it?
Mate, you've never seen a hearse towing a trailer, so it's all a good point. But Is it a sell down strategy? Is it a passive income strategy? Is it a hybrid? Is it something else? What's the exit for you? Is it passing on to the kids? What's the future hold for your portfolio?
Yeah, well, I've been building the portfolio now for over 22 years, and bought and sold properties over the years, done a bit of cash flow stuff as well, but it always has been about holding good assets for long term. So I'll keep holding the assets as long as I can, and then we will sell down some of those assets, create a passive income stream, and be able to slowly semi-retire. I can't see myself doing that for a while because I love helping clients, and I'd get bored watching TV every day.
Travel around watching soccer around.
Can't you become a soccer coach? Or
Yeah, no, I would love to do that one day. I'm sort of coaching my son a little bit these days, but I'd still love to have that opportunity to keep building the portfolio. And I suppose as I get into close to retirement, I'm 47, so I'm getting an old fuddy-duddy at the moment.
A couple of years behind you, don't worry.
You guys are old.
The strategy will probably be to move down to our Peninsula holiday home and work a few days a week from there and work from Melbourne and slowly sell off some of the portfolio to create the passive income, which is the name of the game when you're a property investor.
So I want to go back to some of the research. I want to get into your headspace in regards to what you were looking for. When you first started out at 25, did you sort of have an idea, or was it just like you bought what was familiar to you? And what have you learnt on the journey in terms of picking the right locations and the right type of assets?
Yeah, it was an interesting one, Ben. I read Australian Property Investor magazine back to front from probably 23 years old to 25 and read it and got confused sometimes because there's so many different strategies and different stories in there. Yeah. So that was part of the journey, is just doing the due diligence and research. And I always thought that property in the inner suburbs, the suburbs that were more expensive, would always be more valuable. Everything I learnt was about land value being more expensive in those areas, scarcity appeal, land is scarce in those areas. So I always really did focus more on the inner suburbs. My key strategy was buying apartments in areas like Elwood, St Kilda, and the inner 3 to 8 kilometre suburbs in that sort of first 10 to 15 year period. I suppose it has changed a little bit my strategy now, because there are a lot of apartments in the marketplace, and now I'm changing to more of a buy houses in some of
land to asset ratio.
In Melbourne's north and west middle suburbs. So we've got quite a few properties in Reservoir and Thomastown and areas like that, which wouldn't have been part of my portfolio in the first 10 to 15 years. But I suppose you just look at the market and you adapt to what's happening in the marketplace, and there are so many apartments in the marketplace at the moment, and units and developments that the strategy has changed a little bit in terms of that 3 to 8 kilometre blue chip type property to now moving out to Melbourne's middle suburbs at 10 to 20 kilometre radius, which would have scared me to buy in those areas back in 1995 to 2005. But gentrification, change in the marketplace and affordability has now pushed Reservoir's now nearly $1 million suburb, and areas like that. So and Mum and Dad bought their first house in Reservoir in 1993 for $142,000. So that's the market has changed. That house I bought in East Brunswick once sold across the road for $1.37 million recently, and my place was a brick place, and it was a better place than that. So I think just changing with the times, and really for me, land is king more than ever before. So having properties with a bit of a backyard is part of the next sort of, I suppose, the next strategy for me in the next 5 to 10 years.
Not to be confused with land content only. It's got to still have some land value to it, because that's often something that trips people up. They say, I've got to have land, which means they go 40 k's out, and they ignore something closer in that has less land, but it's about land value rather than land content. You agree?
Absolutely. And I just recently bought a investment property for a client, and we bought it on the half block in Reservoir, and we still got 350 square metres of dirt rather than going out to Timbuktu somewhere and getting a big acreage property. For me, the golden rules are now sort of that 10 to 20 kilometre radius of Melbourne CBD is presenting some good opportunities and some really good growth.
Any mentors that you've come across along the way, or people that have given you nuggets of gold that you have been able to use as part of your thinking?
Probably my mum, as the main one,
Yep.
and I used that, and she just gave me that support when we were out house hunting. It took me 12 months to buy my first property.
Yep.
She was on every one of those property runs with me. She was there and she
Yeah.
was supporting me,
Yep.
and she knew the marketplace better than I did at the time, so it was good. And just having her, I suppose she's been the main mentor. She's not here today, but is there in another way in terms of that mentoring. A guy called Mark Shannon, who I started with in the business
Yep.
many years ago. Mark was a very, very switched on business person and investor, so learnt a lot from Mark. And there's been other people along the journey as well. But
any estate agents obviously as buyers agents, we establish reasonable relationships with some of the selling agents.
Yep.
A lot of them have no idea in terms of, more often than not, they tend to sell their properties than buy and hold. Any that you've come across that you thought that's a good bit of intel, or that have been good operators in giving you some insights that you've been able to use?
I think there's lots, Ben. There's a lot of guys out there that have got really good portfolios, and over the years I've learnt a lot from some of the selling agents like Glenn Catino and Nick Renner and
we had Glenn on last week.
Torsten Casper and people like that I've dealt with on many transactions, and you get to, I suppose, learn from them as well. So there's been a lot of estate agents along the way that we've got great relationships with. That's the way that we find opportunities for our clients to find properties, because we're getting agents to call us about off-market opportunities or just listed opportunities. So we've always had some really close relationships with agents, and I can't say there's specific mentors there that mentored, but you're just
learning osmosisly through all of those communications and building up your ideas and your thought processes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I still pick up the papers every day as I was
You're in
before
it.
this podcast. I like to see some of my comments in it, but I like reading articles about the economy and about the property market and what's happening, because that gives me more information and helps me inform my clients. And I need to be educated and informed if I want to help my clients. So, and I also want that to help me with my own portfolio as well.
Definitely.
You mentioned those two powerful words for a buyer's agent: off market. Let's sort of delve a little bit into that, because it's a buzzword. A lot of people want to get access to an off market, but it's actually hard for the general public to get access to those properties, isn't it?
It is really hard, and we talked about those relationships with real estate agents. Rome wasn't built in a day, and relationships with agents can't be built in one day. So you can't ring an agent and meet them once and say, call me and let me know about off-market properties, and they're going to suddenly start calling you. You need to nurture that relationship. You need to contact them regularly, take them out for a coffee, take them out for a beer or a meal, and try and nurture those relationships, or engage a buyer's agent like yourselves or myself, where we've already got those relationships established. 22 years for me, and you guys have been doing it for a long time as well, so I'm not sure how many years, but tapping into those relationships is gold, because only 30% of Melbourne's properties go to auction. Unfortunately, people haven't got access to the other 70% that get sold privately. That sometimes gets sold off-market, distressed sales. So that's where, developing those relationships, if you can nurture those relationships with real estate agents yourself, or otherwise, try and engage buyers agents who've got those established relationships, because nearly all the properties we buy are through a real estate agent doing the transaction on the other side.
Yeah, they can be a wolf in sheep's clothing, can't they? Because how many times have you been offered an off market, you've run your ruler over and you've gone, thanks but no thanks. It ends up on the general market and somebody actually buys it. And I think that's a trap that I see a lot of buyers fall for. The agent rings them up, particularly in a hot market, says, I've got this off-market opportunity, and they lose sight of the bigger picture. They get seduced by those two words and forget that you've actually got to make sure the fundamentals of the property stack up. So you would have seen that a lot, where you presented something and you pass on it.
Absolutely. I mean, the keys in all sort of property purchase are to do your due diligence on price, on property. I've got a 15-point investor grade checklist that I use religiously when I'm buying property, and about orientation, parking, location, all the things that we know make up a good investment grade property. So it has to tick all those boxes. It doesn't matter if it's off market, if it's, doesn't tick a lot of the other investment grade criteria. And also some of the off market ones are offered at, these off market really premium prices. So they're actually not great deals anyway.
Yeah, because the vendor goes, well, if you can get me this price, I'll sell it.
I've got an off market for you. I've got an on market for you.
So when we talk off market, it is a numbers game because, sometimes we might get 10 through via email one day and there's one gold nugget there and we jump on that gold nugget. So, so for us it is a numbers game because we're continually getting emails and calls from agents and just got to sift through the little nuggets to get the gold one at the end. And there are some good ones because, I call it the 5 Ds, the distressed sales, death, divorce, distance, someone's moved away, or deadline. There's a deadline. We buy a lot where you've got old owners moving into nursing homes or they've already bought another property. And so I think if you can try and target those vendors that are a distressed sale, then off market, on market, it doesn't really matter sometimes because often you'll be able to get an opportunity if you can get it just as it's listed as well. It's just as good as being off market if it doesn't go to the internet yet and you're not competing with 5 or 6 bidders, which we're seeing at most
right now.
Options.
Well, it's important for the listener to understand that if they are presented with an off-market opportunity and it actually stacks up, you've then got to be ready to move quickly because what happens is an agent's ringing around the buyers. They need to expose it to a few in some cases, but they need it to move quickly. And you can't, if people are transacting on average once every 10 years, they're out of the match fitness that comes. Sometimes you'll know yourself, we know ourselves. If an off-market comes, you got to know pretty much in an hour whether it's good to go, and you need to be able to act that same day. And you can't say, oh, I'll get to it on the weekend, I'll think about it, I'll come back to you, because it is gone. So speed. So that experience and that intuition and that past calling, it counts for a lot, doesn't it? Because I always think negotiating is a bit like riding a bike. You got to fall over a few times before you get it. But in real estate, if you fall over a few times, it can be pretty costly because you might pay an extra 30, plus you got to pay the interest on the extra 30 for 30 years. So it's important to understand that off markets are great, but there's more to it than just being presented with an off market.
Yeah, absolutely, and always those keywords. Do your due diligence. It's about doing your homework and do it quickly. I agree, Bryce, in the Melbourne market at the moment, Sydney as well. I'm sure that if there is a good property on the marketplace, there's 5 to 6 people that want to buy it. You've got to beat the 5 to 6 to the punch, and that's where we'll get the market report done really quickly. So get your comparable sales, get access to a buyer's agent or a valuer, or buy the data. Do your due diligence on price, and once you're comfortable with that, start moving the process. Make the offer subject to a building report in 24 hours, and we'll get our building inspector out there, get the contracts checked by a conveyancer. Ring the council about any proposed developments. They're all the parts of due diligence that you need to do, really quickly in the current market if you're a buyer. If you're looking to buy a house in Melbourne, if you're looking to buy an apartment or unit, there are opportunities there.
Scarcity's not as huge for those yet.
It's not, but if you're looking at a house, that market is on steroids at the moment in Melbourne and Sydney.
I think if you're a novice buyer, you can still do a lot of research, but there's still that bit of doubt in the back of your mind. I mean, I remember when I bought my first when I was 23, and I really had no idea what I was doing. So even though whether a good deal presents itself in front of me, I might have done my due diligence and I've done my research in the area, and I think this is actually a good deal. But now do I have the confidence to execute that deal? I think there is a lot of people who have let a couple go because they didn't have that confidence. And I think that's where the subject matter expertise comes in, and not only from the negotiating point of view, but if you get presented a gold nugget and you're like, okay, because no two properties are exactly the same, are they? Unless they're side by side and they're exact same terraces built at the exact same time. You really don't have any. So I think people do get overwhelmed by that. So even if it's just validation from asking a buyer's agent or someone, a professional, is this right? Am I in the right ballpark here? Or getting them to do the final negotiation or something along those lines, just to validate it. Because I think people will go, this one's come too easy to me. I've rung a few agents, and is it a good deal or isn't it a good deal? Now, if it's come too easy, usually it's loaded. But if you're doing your hard yards in that area and you've got that confidence to execute, that's what I think, that's that procrastination thing that keeps coming out in people.
It's the biggest cost, Frank. Do you find that in terms of, how many people will tell us, I could have got it for there.
Could have, should have, would have. There's a lot of could have, should have, would have stories in real estate, isn't there, in property investment?
It's the same, because if I always say you either pay too much, buy the wrong asset, you procrastinate, you not have the right network.
Yeah.
But the procrastination one is the safest one to use as an excuse, but it is by far the most costly one. Because it doesn't cost you anything, on your balance sheet, but ultimately over time, I bought my first one in Perth for 199,940, which seems laughable now, but at the time the median price in Perth was 158, and it was a 3-bedroom apartment that I bought at the time. So no matter what time you're in the cycle, it always feels scary. So that procrastination one is the big one, and getting your client to say those 3 letters, yes, is actually why they ask Frank Valentic to help them along the journey, because ultimately, on paper, it's pretty straightforward, but getting them to actually just commit.
And I think the first one that for first home buyers is the hardest one. I had my mother there to give me support and validate the purchase for me. And really, my tip to first home buyers is get some support from family and friends, because that first decision is going to be the hardest one. I let a few go through to the keeper that I should have probably bought and paid more for them in the future. But I think that's the important one. Get some family or friend support. Get some support from professionals. If you're buying an investment property, then you need the A team, you need a good buyer's agent, you need a good accountant, a financial planner, a good mortgage broker. Have your team ready to go and get support from them, and make sure that you're in a position to get the right professional advice, because it is a big decision. You're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes over $1 million, and you want to get it right. And a lot of people have made mistakes over the journey.
Yep, you've got your 15-point checklist on the property, so